Hi everyone, how are you today? Uh, it's just I'm thinking it's spring here. I was very excited. I saw robins on my front lawn today, and it's really coming. And so is Easter. And as you can tell by the readings of each Sunday, we're building up and building up and building up to get to that point. Uh, Yesterday with the children, it could have been difficult, not a difficult a little difficult subject because we talked about a grain of wheat falling into the ground. And this is what Jesus is talking about in the gospel this coming Sunday. And to gain that concept of how you have to go into the ground, you have to die. And of course, that's a symbol for us dying to ourselves. We'll try to teach that to children. And it can be hard, as I said. But so let me start from the beginning. When you're teaching younger children, you're trying to tell them about growth, and because that's what it comes down to. You can only grow if a seed can only grow if it is planted in the ground. What does that mean? And the concept may be difficult to explain to younger children verbally, but you can actually do some things. And I thought about if I had younger grandchildren and this gospel was coming up, what I would do, it would be probably to buy some seeds, buy some soil, put it in the sun, water it, and do it with them. That would be your project together. But that would be your plant, grandparent, child together, your relationship, or you could each do your own plant, but that would always signify your relationship with them and how watching it grow together. And you get all excited. And I remember when my own children were little, we would plant like tulip bulbs, wait for the spring to happen and watch that grow. So that's important. Of course, that whole theme carries us through our lives with our own personal growth and our own faith journey, our relationship with God as that continues to grow. Of course, so when they're little, you have to start with little steps. So that's really important. And then as they get a little older from that, you can get into the concept of bread. And I'm not talking Eucharist yet, but I'm talking bread. You know, when you think about uh, farm, or like, where did that seed come from and then it gets to be baked and we buy it and we eat it. But I would also include in that, when you're talking about bread with seeds and wheat, uh, I would definitely talk about if there's any kind of cultural bread you're familiar with. So, for example, St. Patrick's Day is coming up next weekend. So we talk about Irish soda bread. And there's always someone, usually in the family, or at least grandmas, make that. So that's the bread for that group. Uh, there's Italian bread. We know that. And there's, for me, coming from ancestry of Eastern European tradition, we bake the Easter bread, and it's called Pascha, which means Paschal. And that has the yeast in it, so it represents Jesus rising. You have to have bread with yeast for Easter Sunday. You connect the idea of bread because you're connecting it with your culture, and that's part of it. And you're taking them on this path of growing, of being nurtured, seeds, of helping things to grow, and baking. Because let me tell you something, these traditional things, at least for my family and my older children, if I did not have them, they would really be disappointed. They would be very disappointed. So the bread has become a very significant thing. There's many stories I could tell you about my own experience in baking grandma's bread. Some of them are funny as the years have gone on. Some of them are more serious than others, but that bread has always had a meaning for us as a family, as individuals, and our identity in terms of our culture. So that's always been important. But now, as they're older, at least the grandchildren I am teaching now, they're in sixth grade, as you know, and I'm talking to them about Eucharist. How we go from that drop, the seed of wheat, and how that Eucharist, not only do we eat it and take it in, but how it helps us to grow, and how it helps us to grow spiritually and in our relationship with God, and how important that is. So we did a lot of that yesterday, and they got it. They got it. And it was nice to see. And then talking more about Eucharist, that should be I believe, a topic that we talk about frequently with them. And at the end, we played a song. It was about um, I'm not going to sing it because I do not have a great voice, but it talks about when, grain of seed falls into the ground. And then it has pictures. There were visuals in this song with the lyrics. And we had bread, regular bread, shafts of wheat, and then a seed. And then at the end there was, the Eucharist, the wafers in a paten. So, that whole thing, and I did say to them after we've watched it, what stood out, what jumped up at you, and they said, oh, we saw Eucharist, and they had just talked about it. We talked about what feeds us, the Word of God, and the Eucharist feeds us in terms of us spiritually, um, and other things that we need to do to respond to be disciples, because that is such a gift. So we did talk about that, but one thing that happened yesterday, which I thought was really interesting, and I mentioned this before, I always keep like the last page or two, you know, have them do that during the week, just to keep the lesson familiar, and so that when we come back the following week, before we start the lesson, we do a little preview of what we did, last week. And they're into their ventures. So they're doing the 10 Commandments. So this week, the commandment was about lying, bearing false witness. And there were some exercises in the lesson to do that, to help them think. It was a really thinking lesson, and a lot to do with what is lying. And we had this whole discussion about lying. And what about if it's a white lie? And what does that mean? And that took up such a chunk of time. And I didn't squash it. I wanted them to really experience the conversation and make them think. And they did. And we would just sit there and I could watch the wheels turning, especially when you had to come up with a solution in situations where they may have feel they've seen something but felt embarrassed that they still wanted to protect themselves. Do I report this to an adult kind of a thing, or do I lie about it? And at the end of the day, I said, I don't care what kind of lie, white lie, this lie, it's just not healthy. It's not a good habit to get into. You're better off always dealing with the truth and to build yourself up so that you still feel good about yourself, even if you know, you have to learn what's right from wrong and feel good that even though you may take some, some criticism for it from your friends. That is tough. That is tough for grown-ups. Uh, we all want to look good. We all want to know, we want to be there. But as you mature and you realize, there's just certain things that's just not worth getting upset about. And the thing is just not to lie, to not even a white lie, because number one, you're going to get caught, and that's uncomfortable. That's worse than, I think the worst of all. You have to live with it. And then, so that was really interesting. We talked a lot about that. Talked a lot about it. We also mentioned, and I'm going to well going when excuse me, let me just go back for a second. When we talked about things in school, different examples, and the curriculum does have it. We talked about they shared their own experiences of what they've seen in terms of kids getting bullied or who should speak up for them and things like that. I shared my own story, and this is the beauty of it. You could share your own. This is what happened to me when I was in seventh grade, and this is how I handled it. And this is when I went to my parents to tell them. Um, and they always love listening to your stories. First of all, they get to know you better. They get to make you become more credible because you are human just like they are, and never shy away from telling your story to them. It makes it, like I said, more credible, and they can relate to it. And it does something. It brings you closer. If you ever, that, if you ever shared your story with a friend of yours, um, spouse, anyone else, that brings you closer. I'm not talking, I'm not talking about, you have to go into great detail sometimes. If you have a past with, some things you may not want to tell them, and that's perfectly fine. But when it comes to this, remembering, when, oh, there were kids that got bullied when I was in school, and how did I handle it? So they love and they, Grandma, how did you handle it? And that's the beauty of it. You can share your thoughts, your insecurities about it, and how did it end up. And great example, like we would tell them our faith stories, we could also share with them these situations we've been in and how did we climb out of them. And that's a very important life lesson for them to learn, for all of us. How did we survive it, so to speak? Um, so they're working towards Easter, and and as we all are, and just this time, really, I'm very happy with the deep sharing and the material, and that they're it's sticking, and that's what you want. You don't want it just, okay, we're in class and goodbye. You want it to start to stick. And we talked more again about this week about um situation, like I said, situations that we've all come across. They're real and you can't deny them. It's better to face them. And where in all of this does God fit? And again, bringing these things to prayer. How do we do it? Ask for guidance, that kind of thing. And that's what they do, and that's what they're doing more and more of, because they're faced with more and more because they're getting older. So these things should be even taking a bigger role in their lives. Eucharist, sharing, questions. That's the way they've come a long way from just planting the seeds, in terms of plants, but that's where it started. And that's how we take them and accompany them through the faith journey, and certainly in sharing our own story. So that is this week. I wish you a good week. Next week we'll be preparing for the following Sunday, which is Palm Passion Sunday, and it's a lot. It's the big one. Aside from it's not in terms of it's long, right? So it's a long passion. Yeah, and of course we deal with the story of Palm Sunday. Right before that, Jesus' entry into Jerusalem. So it's all part of the same liturgy, but how it all is so connected. So we will be doing that next week. But this week, enjoy planting plants, planting seeds, whether they're real seeds or seeds here and seeds in their hearts. So that is it for this week. I'll see you next week. Take care. God bless.